Hello everybody, Chris Harris here from Sample Spotlight, and today we will be checking out Red Room Audio's Palette, their symphonic sketchpad, as well as their additional packs. Palette features overall from the 4 different modules. You have Symphonic Sketchpad, you have Brush Pack 1 of Melodics, Brush Pack 2 Orchestral Effects, and Brush Pack 3 Runs and Arpeggios. Combined, they equate to around 70 gigabytes of content. All in all, there's at most 4 microphone positions. There are 45 instrument patches total. This features a full orchestra, as well as a choir, and synth and sound design patches. It's for the free Contact Player version 5.6.8 and above. The Sketchpad retails for $299, and the individual packs cost $199 each. If you check out their website, they do have some bundling options where you can get an additional discount if you add on packs to the Sketchpad. Okay, so let's kind of dive in here. So since there's so many patches to cover, I'm not going to be able to do this in just a single kind of all-in-one episode. And I'm not going to go through, do multiple reviews of each individual one. I would like to cover kind of my favorites from everything, though. So I'm going to start out with the Palette Sketchpad. And what this library consists of is basically fully baked ensemble patches, as well as kind of some breakout patches such as percussion. You can get timpani, tubular bells, some individual percussion elements there. They have a piano, there's a harp, but pretty much everything else is kind of in an ensemble patch. So, for instance, the very first patch is the strings patch here. And as you can see when you load it up, I kind of have a standard GUI. You have microphone positions here. There's some additional expert settings that you can mess with there. There is an effects rack that you can load all the various internal Kontakt effects into. And then they have some kind of key switching and workflow setup over here. So as you can see, the articulations for the strings, we have sustains, marcatos, tenuto, staccato, spiccato, pizzicato, and the 2 different trills, whole tone and half step. So what I'd like to do is just kind of play a little bit of the sound out of the box. Here's what the sustains sound like. Get an idea. It's a bright sound. Palette, by and large, is very similar to kind of the older libraries that we know pretty well, like Symphobia and Albion, except I feel like they've offer kind of you get the baked-in ensembles, but you also get a lot more control over the orchestration, especially with the additional packs and what they're capable of doing. So in terms of this overall sound compared to those other libraries, I feel like Palette has a much brighter sound, and I think that's due to there's not a lot of post-production kind of sound to it. There's no built-in, baked-in convolution reverb that they added. This is just kind of directly from the hall that they recorded in. And to give you an idea of what this sounds like, here's just the hall microphone position for the strings here. And now let's switch to kind of a more short articulation. Here's pizzicato, and you can really hear the hall sound. And let's add in that Decca. Can I hear a more full sound? And then let's listen to the trills real quick. Let's do the whole step. One of the things I really do like about this library is that they kind of offered some different performance, capabilities to it. Most libraries, they have tremolo as a separate articulation, but with this one, I feel like they've got they kind of knocked out the park by giving us tremolo in a fader. Now I don't have an extra controller to do this. I'm going to be using the mouse to fade across, but to give you an idea. I feel like this evolution of going from sustain to tremolo seems more natural in terms of a performance. So you can absolutely blend it to, let's if we map it to CC1 here. It's kind of a may not be for everyone, but I like to write builds in the ends of a cue, or anytime we kind of do some type of big transition where there's a big crescendo. I usually like to start out with string sustains that end in a tremolo, and I feel like this gives me that capability in a very user-friendly way. Now, in terms of the overall interface, what you can do here, you can set up your key switching to different scenarios. They have a rule 1 and a rule 2. And how you do this is rule 1 is there's always going to be something set to that. You can either choose key switching, velocity, CC, range, or even pedal. So for instance, if I wanted sustain to be anytime there's a pedal down, then if I'm playing, pizzicato, it's simple stuff like that. But you can obviously get far more, crazy. You can set a velocity range, and you can get things going. For instance, your shorts, you could all have mapped to a velocity setting. You have control over the dynamics here, which gives you, your attack, and depending on the articulation, you might have control over the release. So let's move on. Let's check out the woodwinds here. And the woodwinds, I've pulled up the chamber. Now, they have a full ensemble and a chamber size ensemble for strings, woodwinds, and brass. I'm not going to do a big comparison, but here's what the woodwinds sound like in terms of chamber. And I'm going to go ahead and switch to the kind of the shorts here. It's a nice distant sound. I'm going to go ahead and add in actually my preferred. Now, if you keep in mind the name of this, it's called Palette. And this particular module is Sketchpad. They really kind of designed this for composers to be able to sketch and do quick mock-ups with. Now, a few months ago when I got this to review, I actually was in the middle of a project where I had to go on a trip, and I had to build up a mobile rig that I wanted to be able to quickly transfer from my big template, or from the small mobile section to my big template when I got back, to be able to produce, a better mock-up. This library worked so well for me to be able to write quickly and still work while I'm on the road, and gave me, low RAM impact, low resource hungry instruments kind of all in one to be able to write and continue to work. And I think that's important, since my work tends to focus on more fully orchestrated music. This library has pretty much the full orchestra to where you can do that and get a pretty close representation of the final product. Now, if I were to, I wouldn't use this in my final mockups, just because I'm not a fan of using baked in patches. I like to have things split out, and that actually works better for an orchestrator. But if somebody, for instance, has never purchased a sample library, I would really urge them to look at Red Room Audio, because this is a great kind of entry level bang for your buck library collection that you could invest in early on and get a lot of mileage out of it. So let's kind of move on. So that was kind of briefly the chamber woodwinds. We can do some of the trills real quick. Sorry about that. And then we have tenutos. Now, the tenuto is some of the tenuto patches are really across the whole line are really nice because they're not super accented, but they have the length in there that's pretty great. And then the marcato has a nice little fade out at the end. They're great for kind of ending phrases with, if you don't want to have to program, a sustain tail, whatnot. It kind of has a nice little drop off. Okay, so some of the settings here, you can control whether or not the round robins are on, or if you want it to be randomized or just cycle through. I like to use the randomization. They have a HQ velocity crossfades, and I've found that this tends to be a little bit more resource hungry, and in their user manual, it kind of explains more. I like to not use it because, especially if you're using high voice count, it can possibly bog up your, a lower tier kind of system, a smaller rig. And then you can have releases on or off and control how long those releases are, or how loud they are, excuse me. And then the effects are pretty self-explanatory. You can disable and enable them as you see fit, but I feel like this really comes into play more so for the synth patches later on. Okay, so let's move on. All right, let's check out the brass here and get an idea what this sounds like. Now, and brass is really hard. I've said this before on many reviews. It's really hard to do dynamic crossfading, and it shows in this library quite a bit. When you get to those upper dynamics, the timbre changes so much. So I really wish, because of that, for libraries like this, I wish that they had included maybe some swell, maybe tempo locked swell patches, swells, crescendos, decrescendos. That would maybe be a cool additional pack in the future that has more dynamically driven articulations. So not having that and having to stick with just dynamic crossfades it's not ideal for a perfect situation, but I got to be picky about something. So in terms of what it covers, the articulations in these ensemble patches are really consistent, which is really nice. Instead of tremolo, they have flutter tongue in here. Again, great usage of putting that onto a performable fader or controller. So that's really nice. Let's check out the staccatissimo patches here. Now there is a lot of bite in these, but because it's kind of a bright sound, I feel like we don't get that kind of bottom end that we really want out of brass, especially on their really higher dynamics. Once we get that bite in there, it just kind of takes over, and then we kind of lose the body. So there will have to be some EQing done in this on the brass to kind of get the body of the low brass to really resonate in a mix. Okay, let's move on. So here's the percussion. Now, this is kind of a baked patch where we have all of these instruments here, and you can edit each individual one separately, which I think is great. You can EQ it, you can pan it, whatever. That's awesome. I love that you can do that. But kind of just out of the box here, hear a little bit of the sounds. Rolls are crossfadeable. Toms. Let's move up the now here's where we get like a I don't think this works for me. The Tam Tam swell patch. It's very touchy in terms of where it works. Same for the suspended cymbal. I would have preferred more of just a few different lengths that I could choose between. A triangle. Again, nice nice selection of percussion. Some of the balancing could be adjusted. Some of those could be a lot louder, which you can, again, control. You know, like the shaker here, we can turn that up. And get that to blend a little bit more with the rest of the stuff. But I feel like they certainly captured the percussion and how it would relate to one another in the room that they're at. So it's kind of like a true balance, if you will. So that's the main percussion patch. Now, I will drag in, let's see, there's a timpani patch here. And this is great. It's got everything split down here. So you got rolls up at the top. And then down in the bottom, you get the individual hands. So you can play and then do the rolls. You don't have to key switch between them, so it's kind of all in one. So I think that's kind of nice that they've included timpani by itself. There's also tubular bells, crotales, glockenspiel, marimba, and xylophone, which I'm not going to cover those. Let's see. We'll skip that. Let's do the trailer drums here. So the trailer drums are kind of a large, bigger, more epic drum sounds. And just to play a few of the... And you can see here in the list, there's a large drum ensemble. They've done snare ensemble, tom ensemble, taikos, and tupans. And pretty much, again, the same setup. You get full control over each individual section in on the keyboard. So that's really nice. And moving on. Oh, you can also do a lot of cool sound design stuff with the effects on those trailer drums. Make them real big. So they've included a full 88 key piano section here, or patch here. And I kind of like it. They've given you a tone control where you can kind of go more bright or darker. That's not the right one. Here we go. So this is the dark coloring. There's more of a bright. Let's kind of go in the middle. I'm not a big fan of this piano patch compared to what I have out there. I mean, there's obviously, libraries dedicated to the piano, but in terms of just kind of fitting in a more of a concert hall, orchestral piano into a mix, I feel like this stuff definitely blends well with the rest of the library. And then again, you have control over the tone that you want. So let's move on from here. All right, harp. Now this is kind of a cleverly designed patch. This harp, you have just the normal mode where you can play, all right? And let's go ahead and kind of get a... Now they have the bisbligando articulation here. If you enable this, you have a speed controller, and how this works is you basically just play the two notes that you want to kind of trill between. And it's a script. And you can, there's no limitation. Now again, they didn't record individual intervals. This is a script triggering the normal or the normal pluck things. So I think it's pretty simple and ingenious, and you can control the speed. And you can do it in real time. So that's really cool. Likewise, there is a glissandi option that works exactly the same way. You would just play two notes that you want a glissandi between. Now we can also choose the scale over here. Let's do Dorian. And it just does that for you. And we can do maybe Lydian. I like Lydian. You can just alternate between the top note and the bottom note. So this is really easy to use. Now, not only have they included just that, but you can actually switch to pedal mode, and you can kind of create your own scales if you want, and then, with the glissandi. And I think that works really well. Now, if I do recall, I believe that it actually does the scale to the keyboard, so you can just play all the white keys. Now, if you just go to off, you can see that these keys, the black keys, are now lit back up. So I really like that. Very clever, very simple, works really well, kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out in terms of how to compose for the harp in the end. So I've definitely used this a few times in projects where I wanted to have more control over the harp and what it can play. But also kind of in one track. I didn't want to have multiple tracks open to do it. So that's the harp. And again, this is all in the Sketchpad that I've covered so far. Now here we have the choir, and they've done male and female, ah sustains and staccatos, o sustains and staccatos, and sustains and staccatos. And basically, they've mixed them across the keyboard. I'm going to continue to do that today. Staccatos sound more like this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, again, I feel like this patch is something that you could spend a lot of time setting up your own playable configuration to control these. So pretty simple. No word builders or anything like that to distract from just getting the idea out there, which is the purpose of this library. And then lastly, or we have 2 more patches left of the to check out here. The trailer tools, which you've heard a couple times. It's blowing your eardrums out. Again, I apologize for that. I'll turn it down a little bit. What this is they have a bunch of different, they have Brahms, downers, impacts, reverses, risers, subbooms, and whooshes. And it's just different ones mapped across the keyboard. And then you can just switch. Again, a lot of useful stuff in here. And then you have control over the sample start and end time, so you can do things like and it's by sample, it's not for the whole thing. So that's pretty cool. You can basically anything you see on here, you can control. They have different names for each one, so you can actually choose from the list itself, or you can just play through the keyboard. So each one has like an individual identifier. We can do some Brahms here. Yeah, the tuning knob also, makes things great. So you can get things to a certain pitch to match your cues. All right, so that's the trailer tools. All right, and here's a fun patch is their synth patch. Now, like a synth, you basically kind of have an oscillator. They've got 2. In this case, they call them layers, where you can kind of control what the type of layer is. And then you can do the same for a second layer. You can control the volume, the panning, and the tuning of each layer. And then you have the playing mode, which you can switch between mono, polyphonic. There's a legato mode. You got control over glide, the velocity shape, as well as the cutoff. And then you have a unison kind of playing where you can detune voices and add voices in and the spread of them. There's the envelope control, and then we have different filters and then the effects. So here's one of the just the out of the box one of the presets called Dirty Leads. Maybe it would help if I did this. sound like that. Anyways, so yeah, there's some really cool different patches, and they have tons of different sounds that fit pretty much. It's genre hopping. Yeah, really cool stuff. So that's the synth patch. And then now let's move on to the melodics. Now I've pulled a few of the patches in here to check out. They have violins and octaves. They have just regular normal playing style, and then there's a concertino. I really like the concertino sound. Cone sordino. That's that tenuto. That I was telling you about. Now, with these, they do have 4 microphone positions for the melodics, and you have control over 2 different close mics. We can listen to the staccatos. Downside is there isn't as many articulations with this. There's not a spiccato or trills, which could have kind of been awesome to hear violins and octaves doing trills. That'd have been a real thick texture. And then, so yeah, again, what you get with the melodics is now legato patches. And for me, it's hit or miss on the legato patches. For instance, you can hear on this one. It doesn't work real well for slow. A little bit faster. To me, it works a little bit better in a faster setting. Not necessarily runs kind of fast, but more moving lyrical than just kind of slow sustaining. If that's the case, I would just use the sustain patch. Okay, so there's the strings octaves. Now they've done oboe and bassoon octaves, which I haven't seen this in a library yet, and that's one reason why I pulled this out is because this is a flavor or color that hasn't been done that I know of in an orchestra library like this before, and it sounds like this. This is the legato patch. So nice little sound. We can do the rips here. Really cool sound. The shorts in this library I like as well. And then again the tenuto. All right, so that's one of those patches there. All right, now they've offered a 6-horn patch. Again, basic articulations. Here's the legato. Nope, that's a violin. Again, there's that kind of touchy dynamics. And the legato is just a little sluggish for me on this. Yeah, it's a little sluggish on this patch, which makes it, kind of limited in terms of genres or kind of style that it can cover. Now, all the sustains are... Here, listen to the lower dynamics. Sorry, I'm using kind of a touch mod wheel, which I'm started using recently, and it's sometimes I forget that if you just touch it there, it pops up instead of just picking back up where you left off. Anyways, the Tenuto is also very nice in this one. Yeah, you can kind of see where what it's kind of good for there. All right, moving on. All right, now here's one of the things I'm not a big fan of, is this solo violin. I don't know what it is aside from I just don't like the sound of it, and then the legato engine in this library isn't my favorite either. Yeah, I'm just, doesn't really work for me. Now, some of the shorts are kind of nice. I actually like that, the pizzicato. And I think the spiccato has a lot of grit to it, which is great for layering for more bite. The tenutos kind of has that little bit of a push at the end, which is so yeah, there's some there is some good in there, and the trills actually are kind of cool too. Let me that's the tremolo, sorry. And if you tell, the trills aren't the same speed from key to key. Not that it's not stretched or anything, but the player changes how fast they play the trill kind of throughout, which is more realistic to me. So I find the trills are kind of nice in this one as well. It's got the tremolo crossfade, as well as a tremolo time locked, or tempo locked. There we go. So you can do more measured trim stuff, which is kind of cool. All right, there is a solo horn, which I like the Staccatissimos the most, I think. There's just a nice bite to them. They're great for kind of building kind of intensity, ostinato rhythms. Now, what this patch offers, and this is a new articulation in the version 1.1 or 1.2, I think it's 1.1 update, which is what I'm actually reviewing, is that they've included these tongued tempo locked. That's a fall. Let's do this. That's just great. And they've actually done triple tongue, which is. Now I'm going to slow down my tempo here in Kontakt. So this is great in how this works. Now, one thing I would have liked is instead of that kind of marcato or tenuto ending, it'd have been cool if they'd done two versions, one with da-da-da-da, and just ended it on like a staccato or staccatissimo accent at the end, and then do that like on a short velocity, and then on a hard velocity do the longer. How this is implemented, because there's a lot of brass libraries that have done this. and you're either having to hold a key switch and do a weird kind of release to get the tempo just right, which ends up, you have to program it at that point. Or the ones that are tempo locked like this, they're just kind of flat, or don't really, not flat in terms of pitch, but just don't have that bite and that kind of intensity. They just kind of lack, they're just not really fun to use. This is fun to use, but I want more of it. Like, it's done really well, and I want to have a little bit more control that allows me to do just a couple different things versus just the single one. So that's really cool. And then they've also included trills in this, and which is, yeah, that's horn riding right there. All right, let's move on. All right, now this is, I think, the one solo instrument that the legato, I really like. And I can play a little bit here. It's the solo flute. Doesn't go up to the high C. And that's fine. But anyways, that is, there, let's resolve it. But they've also included the double and triple tongue feature. Again, they got that little bite, the little air, chiff sound, I guess is what that's called, maybe. But anyways, so there's some good stuff in there. Some of the other instrument combos they have are tuba and trombones and octaves, which, you know what, I'll go ahead and pull those in. And here we've got, you can see you can kind of hear the sound there. Again, there's something about the low brass that just doesn't have that presence and body that other libraries have. So you do have to play around with the EQ a little bit to kind of get that, to get you there. It's like halfway there for me. There's trumpets and octaves. There's horns and violins combo, which you don't see very often in a patch. But let's move on. There's two other packs included with this. There's an orchestral effects patch, which has strings, woodwinds, brass, choir, and orchestral effects builder. So let's check out the string effects. And you can see here, it's very similar to the kind of trailer sound design patches that were in Palette. And what you have here is different categories. You have shorts, longs, stings, textures, rises, and falls. And those are all key switched down here. For instance, let's go to the textures. And you'll see this is a split. We have, it's actually, there we go. This is the high jitter texture. Then we have up here. There's just tons of different textures within it. There's actually, it's quite a very extensive effects list for, a module like this. There's stings. Let's check those out. Now, let's say we like part of this. So you can see kind of the stuff he can do. He can do really weird things. But I like these ones. I like the ones where there's kind of there's a bunch of little information, so you can kind of pick and choose things and kind of create your own sample out of an existing sample. So that's pretty nice. Let's so great, kind of inspiring stuff there. Let's check out the woodwinds. Now, these load times for me are, I don't know if it's because these are larger patches than the other ones, but I did do a battery save before, especially before doing this review. So I don't know why there's a little bit of a delay before it loads, but it could be just system specific as well as also dealing with screen capture. So I don't usually have that much of a problem. There's some interesting ones in there. Let's do textures. All right, you get the idea. Brass is just stock full of interesting, fun brass stuff. I like the texture patches a lot. Yeah, cool stuff. And then let's do like some falls here. Yeah. There's acquire effects. Which is triggering, but is not seeming to sound. Must be some bug. I'll have to have that looked at. Moving on. I haven't used the choir effects, I'll be honest, before, so missed that. All right. Here we have builders. So you can create these layers, and you can select what you want, and they have a nice category selection tool here. You can do strings and find some longs, and we'll do, that's good. You can hear the choir, the choir samples are there. I just think that was a weird bug with the instrument itself. So that is pretty much the effects. Again, the effects builder, you can do the looping, you can control, there's pretty much everything you see here. It's self-explanatory. There's enough videos out there to show you how to do it. Lastly, there is a runs and arpeggiator, or arpeggios patch. Now, this one is cool in that they've done things that other libraries have done here, but I feel like they've covered a nice selection of runs, but also a good list of different scenarios. So that you could start on the 5th or whatever. So they have all the scales here, and it's basically, you play the different lengths here in the middle. This is the type of scale you want, and then this is your root key that you can change between. So all in one patch. That's really nice. Let's check out the arpeggiator. Now we're in the key of C. And you can see. all the different arpeggios that you can do, and you can kind of mix and match and build your own little phrases out of these. Now, they've done that for strings, and they've done that for woodwinds here. Would have been cool if there was like a percussion layer for the woodwinds to add, but I'm just throwing kind of ideas out there that would be nice, like add xylophone to it, boom, and then you can have something that's quirky and cartoonish without having to program a quirky and cartoonish xylophone in it. So that's kind of, again, it's all the same from this patch to the other patch, so you can essentially just copy and paste your parts from one to the other, which is nice. So that pretty much covers the library as a whole. Now, just to kind of be brief at the end here, this is already getting close to an hour-long video, and I didn't even get to cover, every single thing. I want to focus on what the purpose of this library is for, and talking with the owner of Red Room Audio, Dickie, he's very much was gearing this library towards kind of filling in some holes of instrument combos that weren't out there, but also he just needed a library that he could just sketch and create, the music that he wants to create quickly and get the ideas out there. Because we all know that there's tons of libraries that can get the job done and produce, high quality output, but all of them have different workflows. He wanted something with a pretty much single workflow, or that can be configured to a single workflow across all the patches, have a very consistent sample or articulation content from each patch to another, that he can just sit down and write and work and boom, get things done quickly. And having used this library in that context of being on the road and needing to get things done quickly, I definitely think that he hit it out the park with this library. The other kind of big all-in-one toolkits, as you will, that offer similar things, they just don't have all the different idioms for the orchestra that you write for, such as these runs and arpeggios or the effects that let you write in an idiomatic way for the instruments that this one does. There are some little things that I'm not a big fan of, like the legato isn't the best for a lot of the instruments and the melodics, but in the ones that there are, they do sound great, like the flute. The shorts articulations in most of the patches here are pretty great, and I've definitely been using them in my mock-ups as a layering tool to add more bite and crisp. Again, because this was recorded in a hall and they were pretty consistent, from each section to section, it does have this kind of brighter characteristic to the sound than most libraries like this, so it definitely has its own character that sets it apart and gives you more control in terms of getting a brighter sound, a naturally bright sound, but you can darken it up if you will. It's a lot harder to do that with libraries that kind of have a darker tone to them. So yeah, all in all, I mean, there's quite a few pros and there's quite a few cons. I'd say if you are someone who is on the fence of buying this and you don't own kind of an all-in-one starter pack, palette, and the additional packs that are offered from Red Room Audio are definitely the route to take. I would definitely get the Symphonic Sketchpad first, and if you have enough money to at least buy one additional pack, I would suggest the Melodics, just because you get additional instrument sections and instrument combos that make orchestration a lot easier in terms of writing individual lines. But as a whole, the whole library, it works really well together, and it would definitely be on my wish list. If I was needing something starting out, I wish after using it, it's kind of going back from libraries I bought over the years. When I started out, I wish something like this existed back then, because this would have been amazing for me to get started with. So, as always, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about this library in particular, feel free to put them down in the comments section. Also, check out redroomaudio.com for more information about the Palette series. Once again, thanks for watching. Take care, and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.